If you've watched any of my other videos, you would know that I often discuss resonators and their symbolism, references, and design language. One of the things I always regret, however, is that it kind of limits me to only talk about the characters, and a lot of the other aspects of Wuthering Waves' lore and environmental storytelling is missed. Among these is the symbolic inspirations that underpin the bosses of Wuthering Waves, which make up a critical part of its story. However, besides when they link their characters, such as the Dragon of Dirge for Brant, Hecate for Fleurdelys, and recently Sigillum for Ameth, we don't really sit down and talk about the massive chunk of culture, literature, and mythology that underpins their design. So while Wuthering Waves' bosses are just things you click at mindlessly every day for materials, today I want to put them under an analytical microscope. Let's look at the symbolism and references that have been in our faces all this time. While not every boss has a symbolic reference, there are many that are not so obvious or have links you wouldn't expect. The Mech Abomination is one such example. While seemingly just a Court of Cervantes accident, a giant mech horror of bits and parts, its description speaks of a creation that evolves and achieves perfection from consuming machines and frequencies. It is a haunting symbol of humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific advancement, a subtle reminder of our obsession and descent into madness. Now, while this doesn't seem to link to anything, anyone who has even read a few books may already know that this is a very obvious thematic nod to Mary Shelley's infamous Frankenstein. Ignoring the obvious design parallels of a shoddy artificial creation, bits and parts, Frankenstein is one of the first books into transhumanism, a warning for humanity's ambition to create life and play God. As Dr. Victor in Frankenstein eventually becomes crazy and narcissistic in his ambition, he, like the Court of Cervantes researchers who designed the Mech Abomination, dies alongside his entire family trying to stop the very thing he created. While the Mourning Aix seems to be an original story, the quest name which has you explore it is particularly interesting. The Stygian Lacrimosa is fascinating, especially now in 3.1, because Stygian is an adjective used to describe the river Styx, probably the most famous of the 5 rivers on the Greek underworld. We see this within Augusta's vision in the Darktide, within the Chaos in Juno's story, and if that wasn't obvious enough, you literally cross it in the Darktide with Charon, or the Great Architect. Now, the Mourning Aix's quest also references a Lacrimosa, which is not just a fancy word, but also part of the final section of the Dies Irae, a poetic sequence that describes the Day of Wrath, or just Judgment in Christianity. This has been referenced once again in 3.0, because the achievement for killing the Reactor Husk 50 times is literally called Dies Irae. It's basically just language which suggests doom and the end of the world, that is often used within the world of Solaris 3, that is fighting the Lament. Okay, Jiwei is technically a sentinel as well as a boss, but I found the Huanglong sentinels themselves particularly interesting, so let's dedicate a moment to talk about them. If you didn't know already, Huanglong is interesting because it's a country of 7 sentinels, and we actually already know the names of 3 of them because of the NPCs and events like the Moon Chasing Festival. We have Jiwei of Jinzhou, of course, but also Xin, the Fox of Mengzhou, as well as Fang, the Solar Hare. They are all based on the real 7 mansions of the Azure Dragon, or Qianlong, with Jiwei being the claw, Xin being the heart, and Fang being the room. So yeah, we basically actually already know all the names of Huanglong's 7 sentinels already. We'll probably see more about this later on though, so let's move on for now. Lorelei is where stuff starts getting really interesting. Lorelei, being the second hottest boss in the game, may not surprise you as being based on a maiden in a famous German poem by Heinrich Heine called Die Lorelei. Within it, Lorelei is a majestic mermaid on the Rhine River, whose golden hair and hypnotizing melody causes sailors nearby to crash on the rocks. This poem and myth comes from a real rock called, you guessed it, Lorelei, on the River Rhine, which has been the site of many disasters in history. As such, tales of mermaids and sirens have been used to explain why this happens. Lorelei in Wuthering Waves is also a beautiful singing maiden who dwells within the foggy Nimbus Sanctum, with her boss drop, the Cleansing Conch, also linking to how the real Lorelei has sound anomalies. However, Lorelei also has a darker side. Her second name, the Queen of the Night, is a reference to the antagonist of Mozart's 1791 opera, the Magic Flute. The Queen of the Night is a figure who has been corrupted by rage, selfishness, and jealousy, just like how Lorelei in Wuthering Waves sealed herself in the Atrium of Reflections after she lost her mind. Her wish to cloak the entire sanctum in endless darkness is the exact same thing that the Queen of the Night wants to do in Mozart's opera, hence the reference. The Dragon of Dirge is very interesting, and as such we need to briefly talk about the story for a little bit. The Dragon of Dirge, whose real name is Gehinnom, was originally Cardafia's pet dragon, which was later corrupted and used as a sort of executioner in the Penitent's End, where the Order sends sinners and the doomed pilgrims sail to. To preface, Penitent's End describes a place of final repentance, and the Dragon of Dirge's real name, Gehinnom, definitely alludes to that. Gehinnom, or Gehenna, in Christianity and primarily Judaism, is seen as essentially a field of punishment. While it is oftentimes even seen as hell itself, it's actually a place outside Jerusalem where some crazy stuff happened, like curses and child sacrifice and Old Testament kind of things. Which you can probably imagine matches a place that the Dragon of Dirge in-game guards pretty well. Fleurdelys is a very symbolically charged character, so it's no surprise that Hecate is also rich in her references. Named after a Greek goddess that is often associated with liminality, borders, and death, Hecate is heavily associated with Fleurdelys, who is also in purgatory, stumbling between life and death. However, what one may not know is that Hecate is also a character within Shakespeare's play Macbeth, which Kuro excessively references in regards to Fenrico and Fleurdelys. Fleurdelys, speaking through Hecate within the 2.0 boss fight, reflects the role Hecate has as a queen of the three witches during a play, who wants to bring on Macbeth's downfall. Fenrico, who is Macbeth's analogue, is undone by Fleurdelys' promises and prophecies. If you want to learn more about this in detail, I'd recommend watching both my video on Fleurdelys linked to Macbeth, as well as Fenrico, whose last name was unceremoniously revealed to be Macbeth. While Fleurdelys naturally ties to Cardafia, Fleurdelys is a side of her character that is bound by suffering and duty. I've covered all this stuff and more in my video on Cardafia if you're interested, but Fleurdelys comes from the heraldic symbol of the Fleur-de-Lis, or the Lily of the Valley. While this symbolic link is incredibly obvious if you happen to be French, of course, the Fleur-de-Lis is a symbol that's been used by kings and figures like Joan of Arc to denote duty, purity, and divinity. As Fleurdelys in Wuthering Waves has to take on a predestined duty to suffer for the sake of Renaceda's survival, it is unsurprising that much of her character and story makes direct references to Joan of Arc and the Fleur-de-Lis that is emblazoned on her coat of arms. As the Faalse Sovereign is really just a reflection of the Frenodian Leviathan, it's important to understand what is the inspiration underpinning that. In a dedicated video, I go through the inspiration behind the Frenodian Leviathan, being the political theory of Thomas Hobbes in his book named, well, Leviathan. To summarize, Hobbes believes that the only way to curb the savagery of humanity is to tightly control and unite them under absolute power, using whatever net means necessary, manipulation, religion, and more, to make a supposed paradise free from violence. Unsurprisingly, the Faalse Sovereign is a reflection of that. It advocates for a utopia of unity that reflects the yearning of the masses. What is interesting, however, is that the Faalse Sovereign is a puppet king, a manifestation of will. Hobbes and many other political theorists often ascertain that for complete control over society, a figurehead, a puppet, is needed to provide a rallying point to center around, that like the Faalse Sovereign, does not exist in a corporal sense, but is used to corral and unite the people. Hyvatia, who is made from exostrider parts and whose role is to calculate and monitor the reactor drive, is named after a female mathematician and philosopher who lived in Egypt around 400 AD called Hypatia. She was well renowned for her knowledge, editing, and making commentary on many famous classical works, as well as being a teacher of many famous people, which matches what Hyvatia does: calculate and monitor the drive. However, Hypatia is unfortunately most well known for a fall from grace, when she was killed by a Christian mob, mirroring how Hyvatia in Wuthering Waves is corrupted and must be defeated in 3.0, hence her achievement name, The Day the Drive Fell. While the name of the Reactor Husk may not provide many links, within the overarching theory of Ragnarok and Norse mythology that underpins Lorelei, which I have made many videos discussing here, the design and behaviour of it, especially within Act 2 of 3.0, is very reflective of the legend of Skoll and Fenrir. Within Norse mythology, these two wolves are destined to eat and swallow the sun during Ragnarok, which is quite parallel to how the Reactor Husk is part of the mission that literally brings down the sun, the reactor drive, during Act 2. Additionally, the achievement you get for killing the Reactor Husk 50 times, Dies Irae, is based on a Christian poetic sequence that describes the Last Judgment, the Armageddon, or the Day of Wrath. Like Ragnarok, it is the event that heralds the end of the world. The Nameless Explorer, based on a corrupted Court of Cervantes researcher, is emblematic of humanity's dream to explore the stars. As such, it is not surprising that its boss drop, Our Choice, contains a number sequence which is a reference to the exact time that humanity's first satellite, Sputnik 1, was turned on and launched into space. 1957, the 4th of October, at 7:28:25 PM. To preface, I would heavily recommend you watch my Ameth video where I talk about Sigillum and her connection to Ameth in much more detail. However, Sigillum, which is deeply connected to Ameth, is based on the real Sigillum the Ameth, a seal inscribed in the name of God and all his angels that allowed a magician to control the spirit of God for a limited time. Beyond the fact that Ameth literally does this as she is the God spirit that can control the Exostrider, Sigillum's desire to utilize Ameth to return home reflects their role as the seal. They are a shell who needs the divine truth, the magic of Ameth, whose name literally translates to divine truth if you didn't know, in order to control God, the Exostrider. A further reference to all of this is even more revealed when you use Ameth's outro enough times, the Great Seal. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed this video. It's a bit different from what I usually make in regards to symbolism episodes or analyses on characters, because I have a bit of a backlog in regards to researching bosses, but never really had an opportunity to talk about it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to support me by subscribing, or even donating through the comments, maybe becoming a channel member. I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.